Welcome to Fruit Snacks, a weekday podcast that covers big ideas about the Christian worldview in a bite-sized format. Hey everyone, happy Friday. Today we're going to look at two related attributes of God, and they are grace and mercy. And often they are used together, which is why we're going to discuss them together, but they have distinct meanings and uses. And in some ways, they could even be said to mean almost the opposite of one another, or maybe complementary terms for one another. So let's dive in. Grace specifically means undeserved favor or blessing. And we could almost think about grace in terms of generosity or benevolence. In Romans 1:5, Paul talks about that he and those with him have been bestowed with grace and apostleship. And the implication there is that the only reason that they are apostles, that they've been given the mission and the charge that they have been given by God, is due to God's favor and blessing on them. It's not because they deserved to be apostles, but God has chosen to give them that gift and that calling anyway. And then later in Romans, in chapter 5, in verses 2, 15, and 17 specifically, Paul associates this idea of grace with a free gift from God, underscoring this idea of God's grace being an undeserved favor or blessing. If you give someone a gift, it's not necessarily because they deserve it. There's gifts that are given just because you love them or because you want to do something for them. It's not about them earning the gift. It's something that you do for them or on their behalf. And then there's another way that grace gets used in the New Testament, and Paul talks about this idea that Christians are now under grace as opposed to being under the law. And what this is referring to is that there is a new paradigm based on the reality of the cross, that in light of what Jesus did and his work on the cross, those who are now living as his followers, who have been born again, are living under a new paradigm. And that paradigm is not based on the law, on trying to keep the law and be quote unquote good enough. The paradigm is now based on living under grace. We live in light of God having shown us undeserved favor and blessing. And we can live in freedom under that grace, that there's a certain amount of relaxation that we can have and experience and peace that we can have as Christians, knowing that our reality is not based on how well we adhere to the law, but it is based on the fact that through Christ, we've been given a great gift. And we can just rest in that gift that we've been given. Now, mercy, on the other hand, would be something more akin to the withholding of a deserved punishment. It's this idea of softening when you could rightly be hard or harsh, but you're choosing to stop short of what is fully deserved. And in the Old Testament, we see this idea even in the very beginnings of Levitical law and the sacrifices. The blood was sprinkled on the Ark of the Covenant, which was also called the mercy seat. And it was done as an atonement for sin. So this idea right in the earliest part of the law and the priestly observances and rituals of mercy being associated with the withholding of punishment, specifically for sin, or the atoning for sin so that punishment would not come. Now in the New Testament, back in Romans, we see in chapter 11, verses 30 through 32, that Paul mentions this idea that as Christians, Many of us we've all been disobedient, and yet we have received mercy. And so this idea of mercy is directly contrasted against disobedience, implying that our disobedience rightly deserved punishment, but instead of punishment, we've been shown mercy. That because of Jesus and our redemption, our actual received punishment has been pulled short. We don't receive what we did rightly deserve. To visualize these concepts and how they're different from one another, I'm gonna ask you to do something different. I want you to take a piece of paper, and in the middle of that piece of paper, I want you to write the words, "What I deserve." And starting on the left side of that paper, above it, I want you to start to draw a line from the left side of the paper over toward the middle, toward those words, "What I deserve," but above it. And as you get to it, I want you to keep drawing the line until you pass it and go about halfway again to the other side of the paper, and then stop. And I want you to label that top line grace. Now I want you to go underneath the words "what I deserve" just a little bit, and I want you to once again start on the left-hand side of the paper and start drawing a line. And when you get about halfway to the words "what I deserve," I want you to stop. And under that line, I want you to write the word mercy. This is a great way of visualizing how these two concepts differ from one another, because when it comes to what I deserve, grace goes beyond what I deserve, while mercy stops short of what I deserve. And so in this way, we can see how the Bible uses these terms, certainly in complementary ways. They're very much related, especially when we get into the cross, but they are different and they're distinct concepts. Now, speaking of the cross, and at some point in the next several weeks, we're going to get into this, but the cross is the ultimate collision point for a lot of these doctrines and attributes of God that we've talked about this week. In the cross of Jesus, we see not only grace, God's generosity and undeserved favor and blessing, we also see God's mercy, his withholding of deserved punishment from us, but we also see God's justice and making sure that sin is punished and not just waved off or forgotten about. And the cross is the focal point for God's grace and his mercy and his justice, which makes it an incredible, incredible doctrine to study. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and weekend, and I will see you back here on Monday for more Fruit Snacks.